Her family sold her as useless, but a lonely mountain man built her a cabin and called her wife. Maria was born in a small, dusty village at the edge of rolling hills where life was hard and every family struggled just to survive. From the very beginning, she noticed she was different from the other children. While other children ran around freely, helping their parents with chores and learning the skills of life in the village, Maria often felt she could not keep up. She was quiet, gentle, and thoughtful, preferring to watch the world around her rather than participate in the endless work her family demanded. Her parents, already worn down by years of poverty, looked at her with frustration more than love. In their eyes, a child had to be strong, useful, and able to work hard to help the family survive. They didn't understand Maria's gentle nature, her love for small things, or the way she paused to notice the flowers that grew by the riverbank, or the birds that sang in the trees. They only saw what they considered a weakness. "She is useless," her father would mutter, shaking his head, and her mother would sigh, her hands busy with laundry or cooking, unable to give Maria the attention she needed. Maria's older siblings were not unkind, but they were busy with their own lives and the heavy responsibilities of helping the family. They often left Maria out of games or tasks, assuming she could not do them properly. When she tried to help in the fields, planting seeds or tending animals, she was clumsy at first and easily frustrated. Her parents' sharp words made her shrink back even more. Each day she carried the quiet pain of feeling unwanted, as if she were invisible even in her own home. Despite all this, Maria was not weak. Inside her, there was a spark, a desire to be seen, to be valued, to belong. She spent her days wandering near the river, talking to the trees, and dreaming of a life where she might matter to someone. She read the few old books she could find, learning about faraway places, about people who had courage and heart. She imagined herself walking through forests, climbing mountains, and finding a place where she could be loved for who she was, not just for what she could do. As Maria grew older, the pressure from her family became unbearable. By the time she turned 16, the reality of her situation hit hard. Her family was deeply in debt, and they had already decided that she was more of a burden than a help. The village life was unforgiving, and being considered useless meant she had no future at home. One day, her father called the family together. His voice was sharp and cold, leaving no room for argument. "We cannot keep her any longer. She is nothing but trouble. We must settle our debts. There is a man in the next town who will take her." Maria felt her world crumble. She could not understand why the people who were supposed to love her, her own family, had decided that she was something to be sold like a piece of property. She tried to speak, to explain that she could be useful in ways they could not see, that she had a heart and ideas and dreams, but her words fell on deaf ears. Her mother's face was blank, her father's expression harsh. There was no hope. The day she was taken away, Maria walked silently, clutching a small bundle of belongings she had managed to gather in secret. Her heart ached with fear, sadness, and disbelief. She did not cry. She did not scream. The world she had known, small as it was, had abandoned her. The man who had bought her was stern but not cruel. He was a trader from a distant village, and he said very little as they traveled. Maria clung to the hope that maybe, somehow, life could be different in this new place, but she knew deep down that she was leaving behind the only home she had ever known. The journey was long and tiring. They traveled through winding dirt roads, across small bridges, and past fields that stretched endlessly in the golden light of late afternoon. Maria watched everything with careful eyes, trying to memorize the colors of the earth, the shapes of the mountains in the distance, and the quiet streams that whispered as they flowed. Each small beauty reminded her that the world was bigger than her pain, even if her heart felt heavy. When they reached the trader's village, Maria saw life differently for the first time. The people were strangers, the houses unfamiliar, and the streets bustling with activity. She had no place here, no family, no friends, no protection. The trader handed her over to another family, telling her that she was now theirs to command. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. She wanted to run, to escape into the hills she had glimpsed in the distance, but she had nowhere to go. In this new home, Maria learned quickly that life could be cruel in many ways. Her new family treated her as an outsider. She had chores to do from sunrise to sunset, and mistakes were met with sharp words or cold silence. She missed her old home terribly, even with all its neglect and pain. At night, she would lie on a thin straw mat, staring at the rough wooden ceiling, and whisper to herself about the life she wished she could have. Yet even in this dark time, Maria's inner strength began to grow. She learned to do her work quickly and quietly, trying not to attract anger. She learned to observe people carefully, understanding how they thought and acted. She discovered small joys, the warmth of sunlight on her face in the early morning, the taste of fresh bread, the quiet beauty of stars in the night sky. These little things reminded her that the world was still full of life, even if people could be cruel. Maria's heart never stopped hoping. She dreamed of a place where she would not be judged, where she would be valued, where someone would see her not as useless, but as a person with ideas, feelings, and dreams. She imagined a life where she could build something with her hands, where she could be appreciated for her kindness, her intelligence, and her quiet strength. Though her family had abandoned her, Maria began to make a promise to herself. She would survive, she would find a place to belong, and she would one day live a life that no one could take from her. Every day as she worked and learned the routines of her new life, she whispered to herself that she was not what others called her. She was more than useless. She was Maria, and she had a life to claim. The journey was only beginning. The hardships she had faced had left scars, but they also gave her a quiet courage. She would carry this courage with her into the unknown, wherever it might lead. Little did Maria know that the mountains beyond the village, harsh and remote, would soon offer her the chance she had been dreaming of, a chance to build a life of her own, to find someone who would see her true worth, and to finally call a place home. For now, she had only hope and determination, and sometimes hope was all a person needed to survive. After weeks of working in her new home, Maria realized that life could be lonely even when surrounded by people. The family she lived with was not cruel, but they were distant and focused only on their own needs. Maria did her chores, cooked meals, cleaned the house, and tended to the small garden outside. But she felt invisible. Her thoughts often wandered to the mountains she had seen from afar during her journey. There was something about them, wild, untamed, and free, that called to her heart. She dreamed of walking among those peaks, breathing in the fresh air and finding a place where she could belong. One day, as she finished her morning chores, Maria decided to take a walk into the nearby hills. She carried a small bundle of bread and cheese, and with the sun shining softly above, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear. The hills were steep and rough, but they were beautiful. Birds sang from hidden branches, and wildflowers peeked from the rocks. Maria had never felt so alive. With each step, she felt the weight of her past begin to lift slightly. Here, away from the judgment and scorn, she could breathe. As she climbed higher, she noticed smoke rising from a small valley below. Curious, she made her way down to see who lived there. It was not a village, not a collection of houses, but a single wooden cabin tucked between trees. The smoke came from the chimney curling lazily into the sky. Maria paused. The cabin looked lonely, almost forgotten by the world, but it seemed alive with the presence of someone inside. She was about to turn back when a man appeared at the door. He was tall, with broad shoulders and strong hands that showed years of hard work. His hair was dark and slightly unkempt, and his eyes, sharp but kind, studied her carefully. He looked surprised to see her, but did not speak harshly. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice low but not unkind. Maria felt a shiver run through her. She was afraid, of course, but something about him felt different from the people who had judged her in the past. I was just walking," she said softly, unsure of what else to say. "I saw your cabin and, I wanted to see who lived here." The man nodded slowly. "I am Elias. I live here alone. It is not often I see visitors. You should be careful in these hills." "Ah. They can be dangerous." There was a firmness in his tone, but also a gentleness she did not expect. Maria felt a strange sense of safety, as if this man would not harm her, even if the world had. Over the next few weeks, Maria found herself returning to the cabin, sometimes with bread, sometimes just to talk. At first, Elias was cautious. He had lived alone for many years and trusted no one easily. But he could see that Maria was different from the people who had used or judged her. She was quiet, observant, and careful. Yet there was a strength in her that he respected. Slowly, he began to teach her practical skills for living in the mountains: how to gather firewood without losing balance on the steep paths, how to fish in the cold streams, how to tend to a small garden in rocky soil. Maria learned quickly. Every day as she worked beside Elias, she felt her confidence grow. She realized that she was capable of much more than anyone had told her. Her hands became strong, her body agile, and her mind sharp. But more than that, she began to feel something she had never felt before: trust. For the first time in her life, someone treated her as a person, not as a burden. Elias, too, began to change. He had been alone for so long that he had almost forgotten how to connect with another human being. Maria's quiet presence softened him. He laughed more often, spoke with gentleness, and began to share stories from his past, stories of the mountains, of animals, and of survival. He told her about the winters he had endured alone, the storms that had tested his strength, and the nights when the cold wind had howled through the cabin. Maria listened with fascination, her respect for him growing each day. One morning, as the sun rose behind the peaks, Elias suggested they build a new cabin together. The old one was small and falling apart, and he thought it would be safer to construct a sturdier home. Maria's heart leaped with excitement. She had never built anything before, but the thought of creating something with her own hands, alongside someone who believed in her, filled her with joy. They carried heavy logs up the slopes, hammered nails into wood, and patched the roof against leaks. There were moments of frustration when the wood would not fit, when the rain would fall unexpectedly, or when the cold made their fingers numb. Yet, with each challenge, Maria and Elias learned to rely on one another. She admired his patience and strength, and he admired her determination and intelligence. Together, they were stronger than they had ever been alone. As they worked, they talked about their lives. Maria spoke of her family, the way they had treated her, and the pain she had endured. Elias listened without judgment, offering only understanding and kindness. He shared his own loneliness, how he had chosen to live away from society to avoid being hurt, In their stories, they found common ground, a recognition that the world could be harsh, but that together they could face it. In the evenings, after a long day of work, they would sit by the fire, eating simple meals and watching the stars appear in the clear night sky. Maria felt a warmth she had never known, a sense of belonging and peace. She no longer felt invisible or useless. She was learning, growing, and creating a life that was hers. Sometimes Maria would pause and look at Elias, noticing how his eyes softened when he spoke to her, how he seemed less guarded. She felt a flutter of something new in her chest, a feeling she could not yet name. Elias, too, felt the change in his heart. Maria had brought light into his solitary life, a warmth he had not realized he had been missing. Their days followed a rhythm of work and quiet companionship, each moment strengthening the bond between them. Maria taught Elias small things she had learned from books and from observing the world: how to make simple remedies from herbs, how to identify birds and plants, and even how to repair small tools. In return, Elias taught her survival skills, how to navigate the mountains safely, and how to find strength in solitude. One morning, after a particularly harsh night when a storm had battered the cabin, Maria realized something profound. She had been afraid of life for so long, afraid of being rejected, abandoned, or used. But here, in this place among the mountains, she felt brave. She felt capable. She felt loved, not just by Elias, though that was growing quietly in her heart, but by life itself, for giving her this chance to learn, grow, and belong. Elias noticed the change in her too. He saw her standing taller, moving with confidence, speaking with determination. He felt a quiet pride and affection that he had not allowed himself to feel for years. For the first time, he thought of the future, not as a lonely man surviving in the mountains, but as someone who might build a life with another, someone who could share his joys and burdens alike. Though neither of them spoke these thoughts aloud, the unspoken bond between Maria and Elias grew stronger each day. The mountains, once a symbol of isolation, became a place of possibility. The cabin they were building was not just a shelter, it was a home, a place where they could start anew, where past pains could fade, and where a future filled with hope could take root. As the sun set behind the peaks, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Maria and Elias stood together, looking at the cabin they had built with their own hands. Their hands were rough and tired, their bodies sore, but their hearts were full. For the first time in their lives, both of them felt that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Maria knew that her journey was far from over. There would still be challenges, storms, and hardships, but she had found a companion, a teacher, and a friend in Elias. She had discovered her own strength and value, and she had learned that sometimes the world's harshest judgments are not the truth. They are only obstacles to overcome on the path to a life worth living. And so, as the first stars appeared in the night sky and the wind whispered through the mountain trees, Maria felt hope. She felt courage. She felt the quiet, steady warmth of belonging. And though she could not yet see the full story of her life ahead, she knew that with the Elias by her side, she could face whatever came next, ready to build a life that was truly her own. Winter came swiftly to the mountains. One morning, Maria woke to find the peaks dusted in snow, the trees heavy with ice, and the valley below blanketed in white. The cabin, which had been their shared pride and effort, now seemed small and fragile against the vast, cold wilderness. The beauty of the snow filled her with awe, but a shiver ran down her spine. Winter in the mountains was not gentle. It was wild, relentless, and sometimes dangerous. Elias noticed her unease. "It will be cold," he said quietly. "The storms can come without warning. We must prepare." His tone was calm but serious. and Maria knew he spoke from experience. Over the past months, she had learned to read the mountains as he did, watching the clouds, feeling the wind, listening to the distant groan of ice cracking. They spent the morning stacking firewood, checking the roof for leaks, and storing dried food and water. Every small task reminded Maria that life in the mountains required constant attention and care. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a dark, heavy gray. The wind picked up, moaning through the trees, and Maria felt a growing sense of tension in the air. Elias stood by the door, his hands on the frame, watching the horizon. "A storm is coming," he said simply. "We need to stay inside once it hits." Maria nodded, helping him secure the cabin as best they could. They hung blankets over the windows, reinforced the door, and made sure the firewood was dry and ready. As night fell, the storm arrived. Snow and wind pounded the cabin, shaking the walls and rattling the roof. The sound was terrifying, a deep, relentless roar that seemed to fill every corner of the small wooden structure. Maria huddled close to the fire, her hands trembling, and looked at Elias. He was calm, moving with steady purpose to keep the fire alive and the cabin warm. Watching him, Maria realized how much she had come to rely on him, not just for survival, but for courage. The storm raged through the night. Snow piled against the walls, and icy gusts forced themselves through small cracks in the cabin. At one point, a loud crash of falling branches outside made Maria jump, her heart pounding. Elias wrapped his arms around her shoulders. "It's all right," he said softly. "We are safe here. Together, we will make it through." The warmth of his voice, the strength in his embrace, gave Maria a sense of security she had never felt before. In that moment, she understood something she had not admitted even to herself. She was falling in love with this man who had seen her as more than useless. The hours were long. They took turns tending the fire, preparing small meals from the supplies they had stored, and checking the windows for leaks. At one point, Maria realized that the food was nearly gone. Panic rose in her chest, but Elias gently reminded her, "We planned for this. We have enough, but we must be careful." His calm reassurance steadied her nerves, and together they rationed what they had, making sure they would last until the storm passed. Outside, the wind howled and the snow drifted higher, cutting off any view of the surrounding mountains. Maria felt a mixture of fear and wonder. She had never seen the world so raw and powerful. It reminded her of everything she had endured: her family's rejection, the loneliness of the village, the fear of being unwanted, but also of everything she had gained: strength, independence, and the companionship of someone who truly cared. The storm continued into the next day, relentless and unyielding. Maria and Elias were confined to the small cabin, forced to rely on one another completely. They talked quietly to pass the time, sharing stories and memories. Elias spoke of his childhood in the mountains, the lessons he had learned from survival, and the solitude he had once cherished. Maria spoke of her family, her fears, and the hope she had carried in her heart despite everything. In those conversations, their bond deepened. They learned not just to trust each other, but to depend on one another in ways they had never imagined. One afternoon, as the wind shrieked outside and snow pressed against the walls, a small accident threatened to ruin their safety. A beam supporting part of the roof had weakened, and a chunk of snow-heavy wood fell, narrowly missing Maria. She gasped in fright, but Elias acted quickly, moving the beam and securing it with ropes and tools. "It's all right now," he said firmly, though his eyes reflected concern. Maria's heart raced, not just from the danger, but from the realization of how much she valued him and how much she feared losing him. The storm tested them in more ways than one. Food became scarce, the fire needed constant attention, and the cold seeped into their bones. Yet every challenge also brought them closer. Maria discovered that she was stronger than she had believed. She could chop wood, carry water, and help secure the cabin in ways that made Elias proud. She saw in herself a resilience that had been buried under years of doubt and rejection, and Elias, for his part, found warmth, compassion, and a deep emotional connection that he had long thought impossible after years of solitude. One night, after a particularly fierce gust had battered the cabin, they sat together by the fire, their faces illuminated by its flickering glow. Maria looked at Elias, her heart full. "I don't think I could have made it without you," she said softly. Elias took her hand in his, squeezing gently. "And I would have been lost without you," he replied. In that small, quiet moment, the harshness of the world outside seemed to fade. They were no longer just surviving. They were connected, sharing a life and a bond that neither had expected but both had longed for. By the third day, the storm showed signs of easing. The wind still howled occasionally, but the snow slowed, and the light returned to the mountains. Maria and Elias stepped outside carefully, seeing the world transformed into a sparkling white wonderland. Every tree was coated in snow, every branch heavy and glittering. The valley below was silent, except for the distant sound of an icy stream. Maria felt a sense of triumph. They had endured, survived, and protected one another. She realized that the storm had changed something in both of them. They were no longer just two lonely souls. They were a team, a partnership forged in adversity. As they surveyed the cabin and the surrounding landscape, Elias spoke with a rare softness. "We did it." Together, Maria smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She knew that no matter what challenges came next, storms, loneliness, or hardship, they could face them as long as they were together. The mountains had tested them, but they had emerged stronger, braver, and more deeply connected than ever. That night, as they settled by the fire, Maria reflected on everything she had endured in her life. She had been rejected, sold, and deemed useless by those who were supposed to love her. But through courage, perseverance, and the support of Elias, she had discovered her own worth. She realized that life had given her not just survival, but love, partnership, and a chance to build something meaningful. She no longer felt powerless or invisible. She felt alive, valued, and cherished. Elias, too, sat quietly, watching Maria as she stirred the small pot of soup over the fire. He remembered the long years of solitude, the cold nights spent alone in the mountains, and he realized that Maria had brought light into his life in a way he had never thought possible. She had shown him trust, courage, and kindness, and in return he had shown her protection, guidance, and unwavering support. Together they had faced the storm and emerged not just intact but stronger. In the days that followed, the mountains returned to their quiet rhythm. The snow began to melt in places, streams flowed freely again, and life continued. But the memory of the storm remained, a powerful reminder of what they had endured and what they could overcome together. Maria knew that the experience had changed her. She had discovered strength, resilience, and love in the most unexpected place. She had learned that even in the harshest circumstances, hope could survive, grow, and lead to a future filled with possibility. For Elias, the storm had revealed something equally profound. He realized that life was richer and more meaningful when shared with someone who cared deeply, someone who could endure hardships with him, and someone who could bring warmth to even the coldest nights. Maria was no longer just a companion. She was a partner, an equal, and a source of joy and comfort. As they looked out over the snow-covered peaks, Maria and Elias understood that their bond had been tested and proven true. The mountains had shown them both the strength within themselves and the power of connection. They knew that challenges would come again, but they also knew that together they could face anything. In that moment, the cabin, the mountains, and the firelight around them became symbols of more than survival. They became symbols of love, trust, and the life they were building together. And so, as the first light of dawn painted the peaks in gold, Maria and Elias sat side by side, hands intertwined, hearts full, and spirits renewed. They had endured the storm, and in doing so had discovered something far greater than safety or comfort. They had discovered each other. When the storm finally passed, Maria and Elias emerged from the cabin to see the mountains bathed in a soft, sparkling light. The snow still clung to the trees, but the sun shone with warmth and hope. The world felt alive again, as if it had been holding its breath during the storm and was now letting out a sigh of relief. Maria took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air and felt a sense of freedom she had never known. She turned to Elias, who was standing quietly looking over the landscape. There was a calm pride in his eyes, a satisfaction that only comes from surviving and overcoming great challenges. In the days that followed, the two of them began to focus on more than just survival. The cabin they had repaired during the storm was small and functional, but it lacked comfort. Elias suggested they expand it, adding another room for sleeping and a larger space for cooking and storage. Maria's eyes lit up at the idea. She had spent much of her life feeling powerless, but now she had a voice, hands skilled in work, and a partner who trusted her judgment. Together, they sketched out plans on scraps of paper and collected supplies from the surrounding forest and nearby village. Building the cabin was hard work, but it was filled with joy. Maria learned to handle tools she had never touched before: saws, hammers, and chisels. Her hands grew calloused, her muscles stronger, and her confidence soared with each nail driven and beam secured. Elias worked alongside her, teaching patiently, encouraging her, and sharing in the satisfaction of their accomplishments. They laughed together when mistakes were made and celebrated quietly when progress was made. Each plank of wood they laid, each stone they stacked, was a small victory, a testament to their teamwork and determination. As the cabin took shape, Maria and Elias began to create a routine. Mornings were spent gathering firewood, fetching water, and tending to the small garden they planted near the cabin. Afternoons were for building, repairing, and exploring the surrounding hills. Evenings were reserved for cooking simple meals, sitting by the fire and talking about dreams, fears, and hopes. Their days were full, not with the rush of a busy town, but with purpose and meaning. Maria felt proud of what they were creating, a home that was entirely their own. With time, the small garden began to flourish. Maria planted vegetables, herbs, and flowers, carefully tending them through sun and rain, snow and frost. She discovered a deep satisfaction in watching life grow from tiny seeds, much like her own life had grown from a place of loneliness and fear. Elias admired her dedication and skill, often teasing her gently when she became absorbed in her work. "You speak to the plants too much," he said one day with a grin, and Maria laughed, realizing how much she had changed. She was no longer timid or invisible. She was a force of care, determination, and creativity. Animals soon became a part of their daily life as well. They rescued a few abandoned chickens from the village and built a small pen for them near the garden. Maria delighted in watching them peck at the ground, and Elias showed her how to feed and care for them properly. Later they added a pair of goats, whose milk provided more variety in their meals. Every task, every new responsibility, became a way to strengthen their bond and deepen their sense of home. Beyond the practical work, Their emotional connection continued to grow. Elias had always been quiet, reserved, and slow to trust, but Maria's presence softened him. He began to share stories of his past, revealing memories of childhood joys and sorrows, of his reasons for living alone, and of the small things that had made him happy before he met Maria. In return, Maria shared her experiences, her struggles with her family, and her long-held dreams of freedom, purpose, and belonging. Through these conversations, they came to understand each other deeply, not just as companions, but as partners. Their partnership extended beyond work and conversation. When one of them was tired or struggling, the other would step in to help. When Maria's hands were sore from chopping wood, Elias would carry the heaviest logs. When Elias grew weary from repairing the roof, Maria would hold the tools and offer encouragement. Each act of care, each small gesture strengthened the trust and love between them. They were no longer just two individuals surviving side by side. They were a team, united by shared effort, mutual respect, and a growing affection that neither could deny. Winter slowly gave way to spring. The snow melted, rivers swelled with fresh water, and the mountains came alive with color. Flowers bloomed, birds returned, and the air was filled with the scent of earth and growth. Maria and Elias reveled in the changing seasons. They spent days exploring the hills beyond their cabin, discovering hidden streams, quiet meadows, and groves of trees untouched by human hands. Each adventure reminded them of the beauty of the world and the strength of their connection. The seasons also brought small challenges: unexpected rainstorms, wild animals, and times when food ran low, but they faced these obstacles together, always finding solutions and supporting each other. Maria learned to prepare for storms by storing extra firewood and food, and Elias taught her how to move quietly through the woods, avoiding dangerous animals and unstable terrain. Each lesson built her confidence and independence, showing her that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. In these months, Maria's sense of worth grew stronger. She no longer thought of herself as the useless girl her family had rejected. She had hands skilled in building and caring, a mind capable of problem-solving, and a heart full of compassion and love. She had built a home with Elias, created a thriving garden, and nurtured animals. Most importantly, she had built a life in which she was valued and respected. Elias, too, changed profoundly. He had lived years in solitude, believing that connection brought only pain. But Maria had shown him that love could be patient, steady, and sustaining. He found joy in her laughter, comfort in her presence, and pride in her accomplishments. Together, they created a life that was not defined by fear or survival alone, but by growth, partnership, and hope. Their evenings were often spent by the fire, cooking simple meals and sharing stories. Sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance and listening to the night sounds of the mountains. Maria felt a deep sense of peace in these moments, knowing that she had found a place where she belonged. Elias felt the same, realizing that the companionship and trust they shared was more valuable than any treasure he could have imagined. As the months passed, they began to make small improvements to the cabin, adding shelves, repairing the floor, and hanging curtains Maria had sewn herself. These changes, though simple, made the cabin feel like a true home. It was a place of warmth, safety, and love, a sanctuary from the world, and a reflection of the life they had built together. Every nail, every plank, every stitch was a testament to their effort, care, and shared vision. One sunny afternoon, as they rested outside after a morning of work, Elias turned to Maria with a thoughtful expression. "We have built something good here," he said. "Not just a cabin, but a life. And I want to continue building it with you." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had longed to hear words like this, but never dared to hope so fully. She looked at him, eyes shining with emotion. "I want that too," she whispered. In that moment, unspoken fears of the past, the doubts and the pain, all seemed to fall away. They had found each other, and they had found a home in both the mountains and in each other's hearts. Life continued, steady and fulfilling. Maria and Elias faced challenges, yes, but they faced them together with resilience, creativity, and care. They learned to celebrate small victories: the first harvest from the garden, the successfully repaired roof, the laughter of chickens chasing one another. Each day reinforced the truth that a life built with effort, love, and partnership was richer and more meaningful than anything either of them could have imagined. By the time the first snow of the next winter fell, the cabin was no longer a simple shelter. It was a home full of memories, warmth, and life. Maria had grown into a confident, capable woman, and Elias had grown into a man who could love fully and openly. They had created a life together that was strong, resilient, and filled with meaning. And in this life, they discovered the most important lesson: that love is not just an emotion, but a choice, a shared effort, and a commitment to support, care, and grow together. The mountains, which had once seemed wild and dangerous, had become a place of hope and opportunity. The cabin, which had once been a fragile refuge, had become a symbol of their determination, strength, and partnership. And Maria, once rejected and called useless, had become a woman of skill, courage, and heart, building a life she could be proud of alongside the man who had seen her true value. Years passed in the mountains, and Maria and Elias grew together in strength, skill, and love. The cabin they had built with their own hands had transformed from a simple shelter into a true home, a place filled with warmth, laughter, and memories. The walls bore witness to the hours of work, the storms endured, and the quiet moments of reflection by the fire. Every plank, every nail, and every stitch of fabric hung in the cabin told a story of survival, resilience, and love. Maria often ran her hands along the walls, remembering how far she had come, from a girl abandoned and called useless to a woman capable of building a life that was meaningful, respected, and full of hope. The mountains remained harsh, as they always had been, but Maria and Elias had learned to live with them, to respect their power, and to find joy in their beauty. The seasons passed in their natural rhythm, each bringing new challenges and opportunities. Spring brought life to the garden, new plants, and the soft songs of returning birds. Summer filled the air with warmth and the buzz of insects, making the garden flourish and the animals strong. Autumn painted the mountains with colors of gold and crimson, reminding them of the beauty of change. And winter, though cold and demanding, became a season of quiet reflection and shared warmth by the fire. Over time, Maria became a respected figure in the surrounding communities. Word of the young woman who had survived hardship, built a home in the mountains, and created a life alongside a man of integrity reached nearby villages. People came to seek her advice on gardening, animal care, and even practical solutions for surviving harsh weather. Maria welcomed visitors with kindness and humility, sharing what she knew without arrogance or judgment. She had grown not only in skill but in confidence, and she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had overcome more than most could imagine. Elias, too, earned respect beyond his quiet and solitary nature. People spoke of the man who had once been lonely, but had become a true partner, building a life with patience, strength, and wisdom. Villagers admired the way he worked alongside Maria, treating her as an equal and valuing her skills and opinions. Together, they became an example of what partnership, trust, and mutual respect could achieve. Their cabin in the mountains became more than a home. It became a symbol of resilience, love, and the life that can be created when two people work together with purpose and care. As the years went on, Maria and Elias continued to expand their life in small but meaningful ways. They added more animals, a few sheep for wool, a dog to guard the property, and even a cat that wandered into their lives and never left. They built small shelves for books and tools, crafted furniture from the forest, and added a small porch where they could sit in the mornings, watching the sunrise and listening to the wind in the trees. Every addition was a testament to their shared effort, creativity, and desire to make life beautiful, comfortable, and meaningful. Maria often reflected on her past, remembering the pain of being rejected by her family. There were times when sadness would visit her, memories of being called useless echoing in her mind. But now, instead of despair, she felt gratitude for how far she had come. She had found a home, a partner, and a life that valued her. She had discovered her own strength and worth, and she had learned that her past did not define her. She was no longer powerless or invisible. She was a woman capable of creating and sustaining life, building a home, and loving fully. Elias often watched Maria with quiet admiration. He remembered the shy, uncertain girl who had first arrived at his cabin, and he could hardly recognize her now. She was confident, skilled, and radiant with life. He felt deep pride and affection for her, and he knew that their bond had been forged, not just by necessity, but by choice, care, and mutual respect. He had learned as much from Maria as she had from him, about patience, trust, courage, and the power of love. Together they had built a life neither could have imagined alone. Their evenings became a time for reflection, storytelling, and planning for the future. Sometimes they would sit together by the fire, hands entwined, speaking softly about the days to come, the improvements they might make to the cabin, or the small dreams they hoped to fulfill. Other times they would simply sit in silence, watching the flames flicker and listening to the sounds of the mountains outside. These quiet moments were perhaps the most profound. They were a reminder that life's greatest treasures were often the simplest: warmth, companionship, and shared presence. Over time, they also began to welcome visitors with open hearts. Travelers who lost their way in the mountains or who sought guidance often found themselves at their cabin. Maria and Elias would offer food, shelter, and advice, showing the kindness that had once seemed absent in the world to Maria. She understood better than anyone that small acts of care and generosity could change lives. By helping others, she found additional purpose and fulfillment, strengthening the sense that she had a place in the world. Through the years, Maria and Elias faced challenges, as life in the mountains was never without them. There were harsh winters, injuries from work, and times when food was scarce. But they faced each obstacle together, always finding solutions, supporting one another, and never allowing despair to take hold. Each challenge reinforced the bond between them, reminding them that life's difficulties were easier to bear when shared with someone who truly cared. The love between Maria and Elias continued to grow deeper and steadier. It was no longer the nervous, uncertain feeling that had begun in the cabin during the storm. It had transformed into something strong, reliable, and enduring. They understood each other's moods, anticipated each other's needs, and found joy in the simple rhythms of daily life. Love, they realized, was not just about grand gestures, but about the quiet consistency of care, effort, and understanding that built a life together over time. Maria also found peace with her own identity and her past. The girl who had been sold, abandoned, and called useless now stood tall in the mountains as a woman who had built a life full of love, skill, and respect. She had proven, first to herself and then to the world, that worth is not determined by family, circumstance, or the judgments of others, but by courage, effort, and the choices one makes. She had found her place in the world, and it was not defined by rejection. It was defined by resilience, determination, and love. As the years passed, Maria and Elias occasionally thought about the people they had left behind. Maria never sought revenge or harbored bitterness, but she often reflected on how much her life had changed since being rejected by her family. She realized that those early hardships, painful as they were, had prepared her for the life she had built. They had taught her resilience, patience, and the ability to value herself even when others did not. And in that knowledge, she found peace. Elias, too, found contentment in the life they had created. He had once believed that solitude was the only way to live safely and without hurt. But Maria had shown him that connection, trust, and love were worth the risks. He felt gratitude every day for the chance encounter that had brought her to the mountains, and he knew that their shared life was richer, fuller, and more meaningful than anything he could have imagined alone. In their later years, the cabin became more than just a home. It became a symbol of endurance, love, and possibility. Friends and neighbors admired it. Travelers sought its warmth, and Maria and Elias often reflected on the journey that had brought them there. They had survived rejection, storms, and isolation, but they had also found joy, companionship, and fulfillment. The mountains, once a place of danger and solitude, had become a sanctuary, a canvas on which they had painted a life of meaning and beauty. Maria often looked at Elias with a quiet smile, remembering the first winter storm they had endured together. It had been terrifying, exhausting, and dangerous, but it had also revealed their true strength and the depth of their connection. From that night onward, they had built a life together, full of love, trust, and shared effort. The memory of the storm became a cherished reminder of what they could overcome together and the power of partnership in shaping a meaningful life. In the end, Maria and Elias had created something remarkable.